Good day, everyone. I'm your moderator, Lee Judge, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Visual IVR and Some Things You May Have Gotten Wrong, brought to you by Jacada. As a note, to honor the privacy of our attendees, only your name will appear in the attendee window. Our presenters today are Chris Dutoy, CMO here at Jacada, Dylan Mills, the Product Marketing Manager at Jacada. Today we'll answer many Visual IVR questions that were submitted during your webinar registration, as well as those that come in through the Q&A in the webinar window during the event. We're very excited to have this open format webinar today because the questions are provided by you, those interested in getting ahead of the digital customer experience curve. So let's begin. Chris, I'll give it to you to start.
Great. Thank you, Lee, and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris, and on behalf of the entire marketing group here at Jacada, I really welcome you to this webinar. It is a little different, as Lee said. It's dedicated to your questions, and as most of you saw when you registered, we gave you the opportunity to ask a question at the time of registration. And I was very pleasantly surprised and pleased to report that we had over 41 questions already coming in, which we will be addressing today. If you didn't ask your question, please go ahead and type it in the chat window or the Q&A window at any time during this webinar, and we'll get to it as well. For those questions that we don't get to, if we do run out of time, certainly reach out to myself or Dylan, who's presenting with me here today, and we will post this online following the webinar as well. So we'll make sure we get all your questions answered. As we said, this is a Q&A webinar. I'm allocating just 2 slides to talk a little bit about the concept of what Visual IVR is. There are some people on the call for which this is a new concept, and some questions that came around, what is it and how does it work? So just very briefly, we'll discuss Visual IVR and then dive straight into your questions. So fundamentally, what Visual IVR is digitally enabling your voice IVR. And most of us on this call are familiar with the concept of an IVR, an interactive voice response unit. That's the automated robot when we phone in and we greet it with the audio prompts, push 1 for billing, 2 for account services, etc. And we have to navigate our way through this call tree by listening to these prompts, either touching 1 through 9 or trying to struggle with voice recognition, trying to get it to understand what we're actually asking for. And the concept of Visual IVR is to take that very same experience but convert it into a digital experience. So instead of listening to those audio prompts and trying to respond with the DTMF tones or by speaking to it, you can actually see your options as depicted on this image on the right, where you see the options portrayed visually on your smartphone. This means I can literally touch my way through your IVR. I can easily scan the screen, select which options I need. I can go back, I can go forward, I can type alphanumeric data. It's a much richer medium and far easier for me to interact digitally with your organization than struggling through those voice IVR prompts. And to give you a concept of how it works, this is to engage your voice callers. So we're not talking about a mobile application that you have to download. This is any of your customers or callers phoning in on the voice channel. And in this example, we have somebody just phoning the 1-800-ACME number. It's your 1-800 number. We will detect that this customer or prospect is actually phoning from a mobile device. And if they are, we offer them the option of opting into this visual or digital session. If they choose to opt in by, for example, pressing 1, we send them a link that when they click it, they immediately start the visual session. So now they are navigating your IVR visually, digitally on their smartphone. They're able to self-serve, with much greater success than a voice IVR, and we'll talk about some of those metrics later on because you did have questions about that. But they can self-serve visually. Here's an example, within the insurance industry, you might show a picture of the insurance card. You can type in your member ID, which might be an alphanumeric set of characters. You can view past claims or current claims. But should you at any point need assisted service, the agent is always 1 step away. We can always connect you to assisted service if for whatever reason you weren't able to self-serve. And once that call is connected with the agent's going to see everything that the customer did up until that point. So there's no repeating of information. And even better, the agent can actually now still, while talking on the voice channel, collaborate on the digital channel. So the agent can send PDFs or brochures or terms and conditions digitally to the phone, which the user can view and acknowledge while talking to the agent. So very simply, it's taking these voice callers, taking them off that voice channel pivoting them into a digital channel, improving the self-service on that digital channel, but still offering the ability to self-serve. So I hope for those of you who are new to the concept of visual IVR, that does explain at least high level what it is. And by all means, if you visit the website, you can actually try an interactive demo on your phone so you can see that you don't need a mobile app downloaded, and you can see what your customers might experience. So with that, I think it's a great segue, both introducing you to Dylan and getting into the questions that people have asked.
So thanks, Chris. We thought that it would make it a little bit more interesting if we alternated the questions. So I'll go ahead and read off the first question that was submitted by the callers. So does visual IVR interpret the flow or interrupt the flow of the call?
It really doesn't, because visual IVR is an alternate path. So when somebody calls in, right at the beginning of that call on your voice IVR, we will ask them if they want to opt into a visual or digital session instead. And if they opt in, they are now in a digital session. So it's not so much about interrupting the flow of the call, but really rather offering that visual session up at the start of the call. Dylan, Enrique asked, how does visual IVR start the visual navigation?
So that's a good question. So in short, when a caller calls in, they are offered the option to opt into the visual IVR session, as Chris mentioned previously. At that time, we're able to detect what type of device the caller is calling in on, as well as the carrier of that device. And depending upon the carrier of that device, we either send a text message or a push notification containing a link to launch the HTML session for visual IVR.
Great.
Okay, so the next question is, how can you make your existing IVR visual?
Okay, great. There are really two ways you can go about this. Most of you already have an IVR system, a voice IVR in your organization today. So visual IVR can actually reuse those same scripts that your voice IVR is using. So you can really visually or digitally enable your voice IVR by just standing up an instance of visual IVR and not having to create, new interactions. So it can completely reuse your existing voice IVR, which allows you to kind of be up in a short period of time. What you can do as well is, once you've gone visual or digital, you can use a designer to create new flows that make use of the device capabilities, such as sending photos or typing alphanumeric data. So in many ways, you can think of it as a two-phased approach. First, replicate your voice IVR and give your customers the option of a digital experience, and then start enhancing those digital experiences. Ramon asked, Dylan, how can you start visual IVR on the customer's smartphone?
So good question. This is similar to the question that was asked before. So when the caller calls in, we provide the caller with either a text message, an SMS message containing the link to the visual IVR interaction, or we can provide also a push notification on the customer's mobile device that will then launch the visual IVR interaction.
Perfect. And this one, for Enrique asked earlier, and I see also in the chat window, Enrique, so you're absolutely right. You don't have to download an application. It really is through an SMS or a push to initiate that interaction. Suge asked, how will visual IVR work with my current voice IVR system? Again, it's similar to the previous question, where we will reuse your existing voice XML. So if your IVR today is VXML based, we will just take that VXML and in real time provide a visual or digital session for your callers. And then, as I said, we will also give you the option of embellishing and expanding those digital or visual IVR flows to take use of the device capabilities and further improve the self-service ratio. So Dylan, Timo asked, what's the advantage of visual IVR versus a normal website with the same options?
So that's actually a great question. When it comes down to it, it comes down to the point at which you engage your customer. What we're seeing is, yes, you are able to develop out a website that contains a lot of the information that is found within Visual IVR. However, the problem is customers find it difficult to get to that information at times. And what we're seeing here at Jakarta is, despite the investment in web self-service, we're seeing around 82% of your interactions still ending up in the contact center. So when it really comes down to it, it's providing the information that the customer is looking for at the time the customer is looking for it. And Visual IVR is really positioned to do that. When the customer is looking or needs particular information, they don't need to go searching for it on your website. They can call the number and be directed very easily through the visual interface of Visual IVR to find the information that they're looking for.
Perfect. I'm going to detour just a little bit as well, because there was another question in the chat window asking whether the voice channel is kept open throughout the entire session. And it's at your discretion. So some of our customers, even when their customer opts into a visual session, they choose to keep the voice channel open just so that their customers don't feel a sense of abandonment, that they feel that they're still connected to the organization. It's completely optional, however. You can terminate the voice connection once somebody opts into a visual session, and then reconnect them should they still need to speak to an agent. So it's really at your discretion. If you need to free up the IVR ports, you can certainly terminate the voice connection, or you can keep it open.
Okay, so the next question that came in was, what does the research say about the customer satisfaction of Visual IVR?
Perfect. So, this is a new approach to customer service. Many of us are not familiar with this idea of, going from a voice session and then opting into a digital session. And the good thing about this is our customers have been measuring this rigorously, because they want to understand, what is it driving for their self-service improvement, what is it doing for customer satisfaction. They're actually embedding surveys inside these visual interactions, so at the end of the interaction, the customer can kind of give their feedback. So not only is demand for digital growing, we know the demographics and the statistics about smartphone adoption, but we just look at actual quantitative results from these surveys that our customers are giving to their customers. We show about a consistent 98 to 99% satisfaction rating. I mean, it's really quite phenomenal when you compare that to most other self-service options to get a 98 to 99% satisfaction rating. All right, Jim asked, what industries seem to be adopting Visual IVR the most and why?
So that is a good question, and actually what we're seeing is there's no one particular industry that's adopting it more than others. We do have customers currently in a wide array or broad array of different industries, which include healthcare, insurance, logistics, telecom, financial services, retail, public utility. So as far as which one is adopting it more and why, we have customers across many different industries, and at our website you can definitely see a lot more tailored information specific to those industries at visual-ivr.com, and get a lot more detail around how Visual IVR can work in those various industries. But there isn't one particular that's using it more than others. Anyone that's interested in decreasing call volume, increasing the customer satisfaction with customer service is definitely utilizing the product.
All right, great. Thanks, Dylan. Another small detour. Angelia asked in the chat about stats regarding take rates of customers opting into that visual IVR session. And I wasn't sure if we had a question previously asked, so it's a great segue. We're finding approximately 45%, if we take an average across customer base, across verticals, you're looking at about a 45% opt-in ratio. So of those callers phoning with their smartphone, about 45%, when offered to choose a digital session instead, are opting into that. The numbers and percentages vary a little bit by region, global region, but by and large it's around 45%. And there are, of course, a set of best practices in terms of how you phrase that offer and where that prompt happens that's going to change that take rate. But I think, just saying 45% is a safe number as a gauge.
So this is actually a good question. This is a question that we get quite often. So what is the difference between Visual IVR and a regular app?
Yeah, you're right. It does come up often because it can be a little confusing. There's a couple of differences, of course. First, Visual IVR is engaging your voice callers digitally. So these are people who have tried a self-service session and it failed, or people who are just picking up the phone and calling you anyway. And it's taking those voice callers and trying to pivot them into a digital self-service session instead. So, what we see and what our customers tell us, even those with very sophisticated mobile apps, is that mobile apps are not stopping or stemming that tide of inbound calls. So just because you have a mobile app, it doesn't mean that people have stopped calling your contact center. So it's really trying to engage those voice callers who have made up their mind to call you. Secondly, Visual IVR doesn't require an install. We spoke about that, but when you force your customers to download an app to actually talk to you, the adoption would be low. So Visual IVR, there is no install requirement. But third, and maybe most important, Dylan, is the fact that the Visual IVR and the mobile app can actually be very complementary. So what we have customers doing is they want to drive digital habits with their customers, and they want their customers to become more aware of the different self-service and digital assets they have, including the mobile app. So Visual IVR is often a great way of taking that voice caller, really starting to give them those digital habits, and even deep linking into the existing mobile app if they have that mobile app installed. So they can be very complementary, but the greatest point of differentiation is that Visual IVR is trying to digitally engage your voice callers. Michelle asked, does Visual IVR work with bots or other AI solutions?
So in short, absolutely. Regarding bots and other AI solutions, those are different solutions that are targeted at also providing self-service for the customer. So it actually, in fact, works quite well within a Visual IVR interaction to have the customer opt into a bot session if necessary, or if that's what they so decide. So the answer for this question is yes, that Visual IVR can absolutely be integrated with bots and other AI solutions. Okay,
great. I'm also just going to go to the chat window again. It's great. People are asking a lot of questions. Let's see over here. Flavia asked, she said, you mentioned that if the call is transferred to an agent, the agent will see a history of what just happened. Which app pushed this info to the agent, and is CTI still required? So first, yes, you're absolutely right. The agent's going to see a full history of the entire customer journey and what the customer actually did and tried, and where they might have failed and what information was entered. So you're never asking them to repeat themselves, which is a pet annoyance of customers when they have to repeat themselves. So we, on our server, will maintain that journey and all the data that's entered. And if you have a CTI system in place, we will integrate with that. So when that call is delivered to the agent desktop, then we can seamlessly pull that session history as well. If you have no telephony system, you would still need some kind of unique identifier just to retrieve that session, but you could, for example, ask for the last 4 digits of their phone number and just pull it up. So CTI is certainly optional here, but would give you a lower customer effort if you could automate that entire sequence. And And just some more questions before we get to the questions that were sent in at registration. Zaire asked, is the Visual IVR integrated with an existing website? So it's an interesting use case, and we have seen that because, the statistics, I think it's around 70+% of people are on your website at the time they call you. So what some customers have done is, instead of having the 1-800 number on your website, change that to a contact button, and when they click that contact button, just start the Visual IVR session right there on your website. So you might be able to self-serve them at that moment through a Visual IVR session and having prevented that inbound call. And then, of course, if they still need assistance, you can absolutely then connect them to an agent.
Okay, so the next question that David asked is, how does Visual IVR work with mobile apps and QR codes? So this one is similar to the previous question, but maybe we can further elaborate on it.
Okay. Yeah, so, we spoke about the mobile apps. Certainly, it can be very complementary to your existing mobile app, as I mentioned, driving those digital habits and reminding your customers that the mobile app is available, and even deep linking into the mobile app. So once from a visual session, you could even deep link into the mobile app and let them continue their session there. QR codes, likewise, are quite interesting. We have an example on our contact form where you can actually just scan the QR code, and then the Visual IVR session starts right then and there on the user's mobile device. And this is great where perhaps you can actually, print your QR code on your bills or your statements or any customer-facing communication, so that when they do want to reach out to you, they can just scan the QR code and start a Visual IVR session then and there. All right, Dana asked, how can I redesign a Visual IVR so that it is consistent with our other channels?
So great question. Within the omni-channel experience, it's very important to deliver your customer a consistent experience. So what we do with Visual IVR is we provide a graphical designer that virtually anybody can use to design the interaction itself. And you can use this to pull from themes that you have within other areas of your organization. At your website, you can pull specific themes, and really it's entirely configurable to design the product within the graphical designer to be consistent with your other channels that your customers are currently familiar with.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to the chat window again. Konstantinos asked about the costs and the ROI of Visual IVR. The most important part there, the ROI perspective, the ROI you're going to find is between 4 months to 12 months. Every project we engage in, first we make sure and we try and model an ROI that does not exceed 12 months. So the big component of that ROI saving is the fact that you're deflecting or containing those inbound calls. So for every call saved, it's obviously money saved. We're seeing around 10 to 11% net improvement in your self-service. So, think about what a 10% reduction in call volume can do for your organization to get a sense of the ROI. In terms of the cost and pricing, it is modeled in a couple of different ways. It's either by capacity, so, looking at how many inbound calls you get, or you can do it on a transactional model as well, if you want to just test the waters and see how your customers are adopting to it. Another question on the chat window from Moria asked, how will Jakarta recognize if the customer's phone is compatible for Visual IVR? Dylan, do you want to take that one? Or
okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sure. So we do what we call a carrier lookup. So when people phone in, the first thing we're going to do is do a carrier lookup, and that's going to tell us what device they have, and it's going to tell us what network carrier they use. This is important for two reasons. Of course, the device is important. To your questions, we have to recognize if the customer has a smartphone. If they don't, we obviously will not even offer them a Visual IVR session. if they do have a smartphone, the next thing we will do is look at the carrier they're using, because at least in the United States, where we have a mix of CDMA and GSM networks, some networks don't support dual voice and data simultaneously. So I think it was Enrique that had asked earlier about keeping the voice session open. We have to determine if your network carrier supports dual visual and data. And if they do, then we'll offer both. Otherwise, we will terminate the voice. So there is a lookup that happens as the caller comes in to determine if this is an eligible candidate. All right, let's take a look.
Okay, so Marco asked, what is the minimum infrastructure necessary to build a visual IVR system?
All right, so, first, of course, visual IVR will work with your existing voice IVR without requiring any changes to your voice IVR. So from an infrastructure perspective, you can certainly go with our cloud deployment, which means that there's no additional infrastructure on your side. If you do want to self-host it, it's certainly available in an on-premises model as well. It's very small footprint, but obviously the capacity is going to be determined by your inbound call volume in terms of how you would need to scale it. But it's a fairly low infrastructure requirement. Again, we can just work side by side with your existing voice IVR, and you can opt for the cloud deployment to minimize your infrastructure spend or investment. So Andrew asked, can you escalate from a text-based medium to a call without going back in the queue, and can you talk to the same agent?
So I'll address this question as the following. So Visual IVR, it's developed with self-service in mind. So when a customer launches a Visual IVR interaction, they are not connected to an agent until they opt to do so. So generally, the customer can go through the interaction and find the information or access what it is that they're calling about through the Visual IVR interaction. So that's where the self-service comes into play. If the customer does, for some reason, need to connect to an agent, we provide options for doing so. So you can, as one of the options, you can enter into the call queue and be connected with the next available agent. You can also opt to do a callback where the agent will call you, and then there's also chat. So there's many other ways of connecting to the agent at that time. But during the Visual IVR interaction, it's really focused more towards self-service and having the customer service their own inquiry before needing to actually connect to an agent. So hopefully that answered the question. But Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's good. All right, let's see.
Okay, so James asked, should you always capitalize the phrase IVR?
I actually love this question because my first answer was, of course, it's an abbreviation. But then I was really corrected when we researched it and found out that technically this is called an initialism versus an abbreviation, and it was news to me, but that an abbreviation is an acronym that you can pronounce, but an initialism is one where it's letter by letter because you can't pronounce it, such as FBI or IVR. But yes, we're going to maintain that you should continue to capitalize the phrase IVR. Rebecca asked, can Visual IVR replace online banking?
So I'll preface the answer with that was never really the intent of Visual IVR, but the gist of it here is that a lot of what you can do in online banking, you can also access or configure within Visual IVR. So customers can get access to their statements. There's a number of use cases, a large number of use cases that can be implemented within Visual IVR associated with online banking. So it was never the intent of Visual IVR to replace online banking, but there are a lot of use cases or a lot of ways that you can accomplish answering the questions that customers are calling about or assisting the customers that you can also find within online banking. There's a good number of overlap.
Okay, great. Another small detour to the chat window, because it's a follow-up. We had mentioned about the 45% take rate or opt-in ratio, and then Bernal asked, of that 45%, what percent of consumers are able to resolve their question or transaction, not needing to reach out to speak to an agent? So, it's probably a range of about 70 and as high as 100%. I think the more interesting stat is when you step back and you look at your overall, when you combine your opt-in with the self-service ratio, you're seeing about a 10% overall reduction in call volume or improvement in self-service. So it's a very significant. As for how that compares to a non-visual IVR, it's going to vary by industry. Some industries, they have pretty good IVRs that they're reaching 60–70% self-service containment. But it's really, you probably have to look at your organization and see what your IVR self-service rate is today. But we're confident to say around a 10–11% net reduction in calls or improvement in self-service. All right.
So the next question that Michael asked is, does Visual IVR have application integration and API?
Yeah, so we mentioned, of course, being able to reuse your existing voice IVR VXML, and I think that's well understood. If you're creating additional flows because you want to now improve the self-service capability, absolutely, you can reach out to any of the underlying line of business applications, whether that's through web services, REST, SOAP requests, JSON responses, whatever you want to do, it's very open. So if your application has an API, you can call into it at any point to enrich that self-service flow for your customer. And even if you don't have an API, of course, we do provide adapters into some of the closed systems that typically make integration problematically. So by and large, you can really get to any data in your enterprise and surface that to your customer in that digital session and hopefully improve the self-service ratio. Jeffrey asked, how does Visual IVR compete with voice?
So from a truly competitive point of view, we do generally see that both solutions are competing for the same budget. But what we recommend is that you should seriously look into providing both options or channel choice for your customer, because there are a number of customers where voice doesn't work for them, and there are also the same amount or a similar amount of customers where digital is not their cup of tea. So it's better to provide the customers with the option, and what we're seeing just from a competitive point of view is that the preference towards digital, especially in this day and age, is increasing. So more and more customers are preferring a digital engagement or a visual engagement over the voice. So this is seen through better customer satisfaction with digital over voice. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's covered well. I mean, each has its strong points, of course, and I think it's offering channel choice to your customers. Let your channel choose how they want to engage you. We're seeing a strong preference for digital and visual engagement. And, speaking as someone with an accent, I do sometimes struggle with the voice recognition, and I find visual just an easier engagement model. Contrary, when I'm driving in my car, voice is sometimes better because I don't want to be staring at a screen. So I think it's about offering choice to your customers and seeing which they prefer to actually use. I see a question in the chat window as well. Angelia rightly asking us, what are the concepts we may have had wrong from the title of the webcast. So I'm going to hold that question for another 2 or 3 because we do talk about that coming up shortly. So we will get to that question. Next question.
So the next question, which Grant asked, is Visual IVR IMEI or IMSI aware?
The IMEI is, it's tied to the SIM card, and iOS, I'm speaking at least on behalf of the Apple iOS system, they don't provide you access to the IMEI number, basically for privacy issues and misuses of that identifier. So you would likely, if there's a requirement to get the IMEI number, probably you would have to do your own mapping based on the caller ID or the ANI and map that to an IMEI number if you have that. If there are technical people on this call, they can chime in the chat window whether Android allows access to the IMEI, but I know that Apple iOS does not. All right, let's see. Debbie asked, how easy is it to visualize existing IVR applications from other vendors?
So it's generally very easy. As Chris mentioned previously, we provide a VXML connector, which is capable of pulling the existing flows from really regardless of any vendor of the existing IVR applications. So in the initial configuration of Visual IVR, you're able to simply do a one-for-one pull of the existing flows from your IVR, and then from that, on top of it, include additional self-service capabilities on top of the flow itself. But through our VXML connector, we're able to quickly and easily, in the initial configuration of the product, pull the existing flows from the existing IVR, regardless of the vendor.
Yep, no, great. So I don't think there's an IVR yet that we've seen that we haven't really been able to integrate with. So it's safe to say if you have an IVR, you can stand up Visual IVR. A point of additional clarification or note is that you don't even have to have an IVR because you can completely create new self-service flows in the graphical designer that's provided. So, you can give your voice callers the regular experience, or you can create brand new visual experience that don't even mirror your IVR, or if you don't have an IVR, you could still absolutely offer a visual IVR session as well. So, just want our webinar participants to keep that in mind.
Okay, so Mike asks, what is the best way to set the customer's expectation prior to the experience?
Okay, I'm going to combine this question. We had this question from Mike on expectations. Ken had asked about common pitfalls when deploying Visual IVR, and Angelia asked, about the concepts we may have had wrong. So they kind of related, and I'll talk to it a little more broadly. First in expectations, you have to explain clearly to the customer what they're opting into it, what's in it for them, and why they should choose that option. We mentioned the 45% take rate, and a lot of that is set by the phrasing of that first prompt. And we've done a lot of A/B split testing to understand, what maximizes opt-in and adoption and how the messaging should be phrased. So setting expectations largely is that initial prompt, and then, of course, the first text message they receive when they've chosen to opt into a visual session. So a lot of that is the phrasing and reassurance for a customer. But in terms of the common pitfalls and the concepts, I think this is really the strategic part of the question. The first pitfall, I'd say, is failing to reduce the customer effort. At the end of the day, we're not just standing up Visual IVR because, hey, it's another channel. Ultimately, we're trying to reduce your customer effort. So, yes, we want to give channel choice, but we don't want to increase customer effort. And it can be easy to sometimes forget about that when you get into the day-to-day issues of standing up a new technology, asking why. Why are we doing this? And we want to reduce customer effort. For example, we've seen cases, where somebody might require multiple sign-ins or levels of authentication on a visual session just because that's how the IVR did it. And then you step back and you realize, well, when you do this visually, you don't need these multiple levels of authentication, as an example. So let's streamline the process and reduce the customer effort. A second pitfall that we see is kind of failing to take a position of customer advocacy. You don't want to aggressively try and promote and push self-service onto your customers, and that includes Visual IVR. it's going to backfire when you try and do that. You send out the message that we don't want to talk to you. Ultimately, you want to give your customers the channel choice and give them the choice of whether they want to self-service or have assisted service. And what you'll find is users are going to naturally gravitate towards self-service and digital self-service specifically. So, offer them the choice, show the advantages, and give them a great experience when they do opt into a visual session. Now, I can guarantee you the next time they come around, they're going to straight away opt for the self-service session instead. So, the second point there is don't be too aggressive and think of the point of view of a customer. Be a customer advocate. The third pitfall is when you aren't cross-channel aware. And I know for many of us on this webinar, we're probably tired of the word omni-channel, but it is an important concept that you have to be aware of the other channels, recognize a repeat caller or repeat inquiry or repeat usage, personalize the experience, and understand what the journey has been and where they might be frustrated. Just standing up another channel or solution won't solve all your problems if you don't start thinking at least of how to become cross-channel aware. And then finally, you need some form of governance model around KPIs and reporting the results. Our customers have been very good at this, daily showing the results of both the opt-ins, the self-service containment, where escalations happen to assisted service, because this is ultimately how you improve, just by measuring all of this and finding the ways to improve. So I certainly hope that answered the question from both Mike, Ken, and Angelia, and others.
Okay, so Stephen asked, what if the customer doesn't have a smartphone or good signal? So regarding the first part of that question, if the customer doesn't have a smartphone or smart device that they are calling in on, as we mentioned previous, the Visual IVR is capable of looking up the type of device as well as the carrier that the customer is calling in. If they don't have a smart device that the customer is currently calling in, then Visual IVR simply isn't offered to those customers. So the Visual IVR is only offered to those customers calling in on a smart device. If they have a poor signal, which does happen at times, Visual IVR does operate on HTML, so it does depend on your connection. But really, what is the information that is included in the Visual IVR pages is not extremely detailed most of the time. It can get very detailed, but the information that is loading isn't a significant amount. So the pages that do need to load in the Visual IVR interaction do typically load within a reasonable time frame. So the poor signal doesn't necessarily affect many people that are usually using the Visual IVR interaction.
Sure, and should the data connection drop, as long as they still have a voice connection, they can continue on that voice path and the voice IVR. So in a worst case, you haven't left your customer out in the cold.
Right. Okay, so Stephen asked, what does the client need to download to use Visual IVR?
Okay, yeah, and we have covered that now. So yeah, the short answer, nothing. There's no download requirement. As long as you have a device that can render HTML, your customer will be in good shape. Filippo asked, what are the technical and logistical challenges when transitioning from a standard call center management software product to a Visual IVR?
So this is a good question. In short, Visual IVR doesn't look to replace what is currently there. So we don't look to replace the standard call center management software that you do have in place. We do look to add to it, and we have ways to integrate this into other call center management software products that you use. But it doesn't necessarily look to replace what you currently have there. It's just simply an addition to what's existing, so that you can, so that the agent is provided with details like important details like authentication. The customer can authenticate through a Visual IVR interaction. The agent is also provided with the customer journey, So what the customer tried to accomplish and maybe wasn't able to within the visual IVR interaction. And this is all in a screen pop that we provide that then the agent can see the details of the journey and what the customer attempted to do or what the customer is doing within the visual IVR interaction. So I guess in short, and to summarize, we don't necessarily look to replace current call center management software. We simply look to add to and improve upon what is there.
All right.
Okay, so the next question is, will we need to apply a learning program for agents to learn visual IVR?
So, you obviously want to make your agents aware that your customers may be coming in from another channel, those that engaged visually and were still unable to resolve and need to speak to an agent. So they should be aware of that channel. Dylan had just mentioned, the agent will see a full history of the customer journey, what data they entered and where they're struggling and what the call intent is. So the call gets off to a very smooth start. No repeating of information, lower average handle time. So there is an optional interface to give your agents, just to give them the context of that call. It can tie into your existing screen pop or desktop if you have one, or it can be standalone. And in addition, we do provide agent guidance product as well, in terms of if you want to guide your agents on how to best handle this type of inbound call, there's interactive guidance as well. So obviously, I think training your agents ultimately will deliver a better customer experience as well. Dylan, the next question from Ruth, actually it ties in pretty much to the previous one. She asked what additional or specialized skills the agent need to have when working in the visual IVR environment compared to the voice IVR environment.
So I guess regarding this question, visual IVR is able to provide a lot more additional detail than voice IVR is. So that, as I mentioned previously, there are things that the agent can benefit from in utilizing visual IVR to know more about why the customer is calling, what the intent of the caller is. So really, it's a very simple application, easy to learn, that we provide with visual IVR that I guess is over what voice IVR provides, that does well in providing an overview of why the customer is calling to decrease the average handle time associated with agents interacting with customers. So, Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, I think it's been well covered.
Okay, so how can visual IVR integrate with other
cloud, contact center hosted services? Yes, so, our visual IVR can be deployed on premises or also via our cloud. To avoid the need for the hosted service to have to open up any ports, we provide all the necessary APIs to kind of allow a reverse integration, if you will, so that they can actually call out to us versus requiring the hosted vendor to try and open ports, etc. So really there are multiple ways of doing it, and quite literally can do a cloud-to-cloud deployment. All right, Ivan asked, what are the integration opportunities of visual IVR and messengers?
So I think I addressed this one a little earlier, but just to recap, when you're in a visual IVR session and you're interested in learning information or getting to the answer of your question, visual IVR provides a number of ways for you to connect to an agent if necessary, and messengers are absolutely one of those. So at any point within a visual IVR interaction, even at the very beginning of a visual IVR interaction, you have the ability to open a messenger or an interaction, a chat-based interaction with an agent if necessary.
Okay, great. I see maybe some limitations of the platform we're using. Some of the questions literally scrolled off the top, and so I'm apologizing in advance if we didn't get to that. I saw there were a couple of questions asking about references in certain regions and so forth. Obviously, for the privacy of our customers, we won't talk publicly about references, etc. But if you're in a region and you're interested in deployments, certainly please reach out to us, and we can talk about regional-based deployments. I think that ends our questions. I don't think we have any more. Well, no, I'm wrong. Dylan?
Okay. So
yeah, actually, there's go ahead, Dylan.
So the next question that's on the screen is, can I install Visual IVR on my local system, not a cloud? And the answer is absolutely yes. Right. So as we mentioned before, Visual IVR can utilize the existing infrastructure that you have in place for a voice IVR, or you can stand up your own local system specific for Visual IVR if necessary.
All right. Kirsty asked, is there scope for videos within Visual IVR? And yeah, absolutely. Because you're on this digital medium, videos are a great way of furthering improving your self-service, because you can actually walk a person through a couple of steps, have them watch a video, see if that resolves their issue, and if not, then give them assisted service. And what some prospects are doing are actually using what, you've probably seen these personalized videos where the video is generated at runtime with the customer's data in it, very impactful, and just further improves the overall self-service ratio. Let me see if we had, okay, so I think that was the set of questions that came in at the registration time. I think we've answered everything in the chat window. Lee, we will ask you if you found any that we didn't get to. While you look at that, certainly as well, I encourage people to visit visual-ivr.com. The URL is on the slide right now, where you can actually try the demonstration yourself to understand how your customers might experience that. So, Lee, are there any other additional questions?
Well, there was a couple of questions that came in through the registration before the webinar began, and I'll put them together for you. Basically, they're asking questions about using Visual IVR in the public sector, and how can governments use this without requiring customers to download an app, which I know that's obviously an issue for municipalities.
Yeah, okay, great. So definitely government deployments, both in the welfare sector and the tax revenue sector. It's specifically convenient given the fact that there is no app install requirement, so that the constituents now get access to a very pleasant and quick, digital self-service session. So absolutely used in the government sector, and we can certainly follow up with that individual if they want some more information.
Okay, great. Well, this has been an awesome session. We had a lot of questions come in during registration. We have a lot of questions that came in through the Q&A window. And any of those that we could not answer during today's session, we'll definitely email you or respond to you directly via email to get your answers to you. Thank you again to Chris and Dylan for answering so many questions that our attendees had regarding Visual IVR. As Chris mentioned, you'll be directed actually at the webinar to visual-ivr.com. We'd like for you to try the demo, see it work on your phone. There's several different verticals you can choose from to see Visual IVR in action on your own time. So please stop by there and try it out. This concludes our webinar entitled Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Visual IVR. As I said earlier, if there's any other questions we couldn't answer today, we'll respond to you directly after the event. We hope that you gained valuable insight into Visual IVR and how easily you can utilize it to enhance your organization's customer service. A replay of the event will be available soon on visualivr.com, along with the download link to the presentation. Again, thank you for attending today. Please visit us at visual-ivr.com and have a wonderful day.